This work of fiction is intended for mature audiences. It contains themes of psychological horror and violence presented in a restrained manner. All characters and events are entirely fictional. The narrative is not intended to glorify or encourage harmful behavior.
The air hung heavy and crisp, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The kind of morning where the sun struggles to punch through, leaving everything swathed in an eerie grey light. It was a Tuesday, or maybe a Wednesday. I've lost track. But it was early, the kind of early only retired people and insomniacs know. Me, I'm Evelyn, and I've been married to Harold for 52 years. 52 years of early mornings, of mutual silences, and the comforting routine of our shared life. We're part of a group, 12 of us, 6 couples, all friends for longer than I care to remember. We'd always done things together, the kind of friends who've seen each other through thick and thin. BFFs, I think the kids call it. This trip, though, was new. Harold had found this place, a pond deep in the woods behind our cabins. Secluded, he'd said, a perfect spot for a morning dip. He'd always been a bit adventurous, my Harold, even at 73. The rest of us, well, we were sceptical. But the idea of a little adventure, something new after all these years, had a desirous appeal. The pond was still, almost unnervingly so. The water was dark, reflecting the overcast sky like a sheet of polished glass. Not a ripple disturbed its surface, not even the faintest breeze. It felt wrong somehow, but no one wanted to be the first to back out, so we stripped down to our swimsuits, most of them covering a lot more skin than I remember, a nervous laugh going around, and we waded in. The water was shockingly cold. It was deeper than we'd expected too, the bottom disappearing into the gloom. We swam, or rather, we old people swam, clumsy, cautious, calculated movements in the murky water. It was unsettling, but strangely invigorating. We climbed out, shivering, laughter echoing around in the holler, the air feeling suddenly brighter and lighter somehow. That's when it started. At first it was subtle, little things. I noticed the lines around my eyes seemed a bit less pronounced. My joints, which usually complained with every move, felt loose and easy. Betty, she'd exclaimed about how she felt her knee actually work for the first time in decades. We chalked it up to the cold water and the fresh air, but I couldn't shake this odd feeling deep within, an uneasy mixture of excitement and dread. By mid-morning, things had changed. It wasn't subtle anymore. We were all younger. Harold's back was a bit straighter, his usual stoop disappearing. My own hands, wrinkled and veined for as long as I could remember, were now smoother, the skin tighter. It was like the clock was slowly rewinding, and every hour we lost a year, or maybe 2. The laughter had stopped. Now there was a mixture of disbelief and a strange kind of exhilaration. We all felt it, this surge of youthful energy, trapped for all those decades. We became restless. We paced around the cabins, unable to sit still. And then the uneasiness began. It began with sly glances, long, lingering looks that would have been appropriate for teenagers, but felt wrong given our past. Frank kept looking at Marcia with a particular kind of hunger in his eyes. It was Betty's husband, George, who first broke the unspoken pact, pulling her into a cabin, the door slamming shut, followed by noises that made my stomach clench. A wave of something like disgust, and also something akin to anger surged, and I realized the only thing I could think about was Harold. I found him, standing in the middle of the path between the cabins, looking more like the young man I fell in love with 50 years ago. We kissed. Not the peck on the cheek kind of kiss of late, but a kiss that took my breath away. It was wrong, so wrong, but I couldn't stop. It was a domino effect. Couples were disappearing, not to return to their own cabins. The sounds of heavy breathing, the quiet moans, and the occasional muffled cry echoed through the woods. The veneer of polite, lengthy, trusted friendship, the quiet understanding of long-term marriage and fidelity, was gone. We were wild animals in heat, driven by a primal urge that had been dormant for far, far too long. I found myself fighting Margaret for Harold. I didn't care about the years of shared Christmas parties or the summer vacations we all took together. I became that young woman, jealous of other women and desperate for his attention. It was disgusting, but I couldn't stop myself. The argument started as the sun began to set. Accusations, tears, and the brittle words of hurt and betrayal. I watched Betty accuse her best friend of all these years, Marcia, of being an awful person and a common whore, and I almost laughed at the hypocrisy of it all. We had all become someone else, some selfish, self-centered person I didn't recognize and hated. It was a complete nightmare. By dark, we were teenagers. Our bodies were slimmer, our faces unlined, our hair thicker and darker. My own reflection in the window was the face of the girl I had been when I met Harold. There was excitement in our eyes, a desperate longing, but the joy of our youth was tainted by the bitter undertones of our actions. The jealousy, the betrayal, tore through our group, leaving us with nothing but anger and shame. The transformations got faster. We were children now, then toddlers. The fighting continued, now not with words, but with shoves and pushes, the whines and cries of angry children taking the place of adult arguments. Our movements became clumsy, our language reduced to babble. We were losing more than our age. We were losing our minds, our memories, our very selves. I caught a glimpse of Harold, or rather, what had been Harold. A baby now, crawling on the cabin's dirty floor, his face smeared with dirt and tears. It was heartbreaking, horrifying, and yet a part of me, a very small, desperate part, wanted to pick him up and take care of him. Even now, even like this. We were infants now, some of us, barely newborns. We cried, mostly, our little bodies writhing and flailing. Our skin was soft, our eyes unfocused. We had no control, no understanding of what was happening. The cabins, which had been our refuge, now felt like a cage. I saw a small, wrinkled hand reaching out, a baby's hand like mine, and I realized that was what was left of me, the last vestiges of my life as Evelyn disappearing with each passing moment. The moon rose, full and bright, bathing the clearing in an eerie silver light. The quiet of the woods was broken by the mournful cries of the babies, our infant selves. And then the water. It moved. The surface of the pond rippled, not from a breeze but from something underneath. The ripples became waves, the water churning, frothing and heaving. It rose, a dark, shimmering mass, a living, breathing entity. It was tall and thin, like the water was stretched vertically to its utmost limit, and it was a watery, translucent, almost clear colour. It had no face, no features, just a twisting mass of water, shaped almost like a person, that exuded a sense of ancient, malevolent hunger. The creature moved with a terrifying grace, gliding across the clearing like a liquid nightmare. There was no scream, no cry for help, not even the sound of the hungry babies, just the silent terror as the water entity consumed us, one by one. We were drawn into its watery embrace, our infant bodies powerless, dissolved into the swirling mass. I felt nothing, saw nothing, just the cold, dark embrace of death. Then everything went black. I opened my eyes, not the eyes of an infant, not the eyes of a young woman, but the eyes of an old woman. My skin was wrinkled, my hair grey. The lines around my eyes were deep and familiar. I was lying in my bed, in my own bedroom. The sun was streaming through the window, casting a warm glow on the room. It was a Tuesday morning, or maybe a Wednesday, I wasn't sure. Harold was snoring beside me, his breathing heavy and familiar. I reached out and touched his arm. It was warm, solid. He stirred, opened his eyes, and smiled that familiar, gentle smile. "Morning, Ev," he said, his voice a little raspy with sleep. "Morning, Harold," I replied, my voice sounding surprisingly normal. We got out of bed, made coffee, ate our usual breakfast, and began our day. Nothing was unusual. No one from our group had called or texted or sent an email. The cabins were booked for next week, and I remember how excited we were to go, how excited I was to try that pond that Harold told us about. I felt blank, like the memories of the pond were a dream, a terrifying nightmare, almost too real to be just that. I tried to remember the feeling of my youthful body, of the kisses, the fighting, the fear, but it was all like a faded photograph, distorted and indistinct. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I heard a sound, a faint, almost imperceptible sound coming from the forest behind our house. I listened to it carefully, unable to identify it, and I realized it sounded exactly like the gentle lapping of water on the shores of a still, dark pond. I shivered. The next day, I went to the grocery store. Everything was normal mostly. The same slow shoppers, the same terrible music. Everything as it should be. I passed the magazine aisle and caught a glimpse of my own reflection in the mirror above the glossy covers of the magazines, and I froze. I was much younger, the lines on my face smoother, and my eyes seemed bigger, brighter. The change wasn't as drastic as it had been in my memories, but still, it was there. I reached out to touch the image, but the cashier coughed loudly and I quickly bought my groceries and left. I went home and took a look in the mirror. I was younger still. And yet, I was still Evelyn. Everything felt normal, like it had just happened yesterday. I felt all the same emotions. That night I started seeing changes in Harold. He was more energetic, acting like we were children again, running around the house and laughing with youthful abandonment. I didn't know whether to be happy or terrified, and I realized that no one else ever left the pond. We were all still there, all the babies. I was the only one who had come back, and there was no stopping what was coming now. The pond, I realized, was leaking, seeping through my memories, rewriting my reality, changing me and Harold, and soon I knew it would change everything else too. I was bringing the pond with me, and then, just before I fell asleep, I heard the lapping of water again, louder this time, and this time it wasn't coming from the forest outside. The sound was coming from inside my bedroom, from the corner of the room which had begun to form a puddle of dark, still water, and the puddle was growing into the pond creature.
Hello, my Nightmare Obsession fans. We hope you loved this story, and were almost frightened to death, left wanting even more. If so, please share video and our channel link with friends and family, and ask them to subscribe, like, comment, and share with their friends and family too. We really want to create more nightmarish horror stories for you, so please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel now. We would really appreciate it. Thanks so much.